She knocked on the door with trembling hands, not knowing that behind it lived the man whose life she'd unknowingly reshaped forever. Her clothes were torn, her shoes, wet and broken, and in her arms, a little girl with golden curls and tired blue eyes. She didn't ask for pity. She asked for work, just one meal, for her daughter. But when the billionaire looked at the child, time stopped. Because staring back at him was the face of a girl he buried 5 years ago. Or thought he did. What if the daughter you mourned never actually died? What if the one person who could shatter your world is the same one who might heal it? And what would you do if the woman at your door carried not only your past, but your future? The wind howled through the hills above Los Gatos that November afternoon, brushing dead leaves against the iron gates of a mansion that hadn't seen visitors in years. Inside, Alexander Ruiz sat alone in a leather armchair, same one he hadn't moved from since the funeral. He lived in silence now, surrounded by wealth he no longer needed and memories he couldn't erase. His phone was off, his calendar empty, and still, the doorbell rang. Once, then again. Irritated, he rose, not out of curiosity, but habit. And when he opened the door, he expected a deliveryman, or a beggar, or perhaps someone asking for donations. But he never expected her. The woman standing there looked like the world had tried to erase her, and failed. Wind in her tangled hair, dirt on her jeans, and 2 emerald eyes that spoke of pride and desperation. And in her arms, the girl, no older than 4, asleep, face half buried in her mother's collarbone. But what Alexander saw in that child's face made his knees weaken. A memory came rushing back, a playground laugh, a bedtime story, a soft, "Good night, Daddy." Impossible, he thought, yet the moment the child stirred and opened her eyes, everything shattered. Before we go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever lost someone, only to wonder what you'd do if you got just one more chance? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if the dead came back not as a ghost, but as flesh and blood? Stay with me, because what happens next will shake everything you believe about truth, betrayal, and the power of love. A brittle wind swept down from the Sierra foothills, rattling the wrought iron gates of the Ruiz estate as though it carried a message of warning. Inside the towering walls, Alexander Ruiz sat alone in the cavernous foyer of his mansion, the silence as heavy as the marble under his polished shoes. 5 years had passed since tragedy stole his wife and little Emma from him. 5 years of unanswered prayers and a heart that refused to heal. Outside, Carmen Morales pressed the cold brass doorbell with fingertips raw from neglect. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale a prayer she never intended for this place of splendor. When she had kissed her late husband's locket goodbye and walked out of the factory that morning, she had no idea how far desperation would carry her. All she knew was her daughter's hollow stomach and the echoing pang in her own chest. "I will do anything for you. Me Nina." Inside, the chime sounded like a tolling bell of doom. Alexander rose from his armchair, every step an echo of the day he knelt before his daughter's closed casket. He expected a solicitor, a wanderer, someone unimportant. He did not expect grief to come dressed in torn jeans and a tattered pink jacket. Carmen's boots, scuffed and wet, left muddy prints on the threshold as she stepped forward, clutching Emma to her chest. The little girl stirred, pressing her cheek into her mother's collarbone. Carmen's eyes, dark pools of exhaustion and resolve, met Alexander's gaze. She did not ask for charity. She only dared to whisper, "Please, Senor, may I sweep your floors in exchange for a meal?" For a long moment, Alexander said nothing, his throat tightened around a memory he thought he had lost forever. Emma, his Emma, used to laugh in sunlit kitchens, her curls bouncing as she dipped a finger into cookie dough. He had felt that same flutter in his chest when Carmen lifted her daughter's sleepy gaze toward him. Those sky-blue eyes, that tilt of the head, the tiny mole on her right cheek. Pain surged through Alexander like an avalanche. Rage at fate, guilt for surviving, hope he dared not admit. Carmen's request hung between them, fragile as a promise, and yet more dangerous than any weapon. He saw Carmen's hands tremble, the way her back rounded under the weight of shame and pride. She had known what it meant to trust a stranger's mercy, and to find none. Yet here she was, offering her dignity in exchange for life's simplest gift, a hot meal. "Come in," he said at last, voice hoarse. It was neither kindness nor cruelty, but something in between, curiosity tinged with fear. Carmen's shoulders sagged, relief flooding her features. Emma blinked awake and pressed a chubby hand against the doorframe, as if to steady herself against this new world of marble hallways and crystal chandeliers. As Alexander closed the heavy oak door, he saw how Carmen's eyes flicked to the portrait on the wall, a smiling family of three. Arms wrapped around each other in happier times. Carmen stiffened, and Emma let out a small gasp. In that stolen moment, two lives that had known only loss collided. A mother's desperation met a father's broken heart. Neither knew what lay ahead, but both felt the tremor of destiny. Alexander stood in the grand foyer, the echo of Carmen's footsteps fading behind him as he watched her and Emma disappear down the marble hallway. He closed the door with a soft click, an act of separation. Yet he could not sever the knot in his chest. How could he explain the flood of images that clouded his mind? One moment, he was a powerful man immune to sentiment. The next, he was a father cradling a doll who bore his own face. His pulse pounded as though trying to break free from his ribs. He retreated to his study, a narrow room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, all meticulously catalogued, except for the volumes of grief he refused to open. There, on a mahogany desk, lay a framed photograph of his daughter Emma at 4 years old, golden curls bouncing. Eyes alight with mischief, he stared at that picture until the edges blurred, as if the photograph itself had melted into memory. Without thinking, he found himself rifling through the drawers until he uncovered an old family album. His hands trembled as he turned to the page marked June 2019. There she was, Emma, clutching a sunflower in her tiny fists, laughing at a dandelion puff. Alexander's breath hitched, the same laugh he heard in his dreams. A sudden resolve gripped him. He needed proof. Scientific confirmation. He could not condemn a mother who sought only to feed her child. Nor could he ignore the possibility that fate had dealt him one more chance. He fetched a pair of scissors from his desk drawer, the metal cold and unyielding in his palm. Gently, his heart a hammer in his chest, he clipped a single strand of Emma's fine hair from where it lay on Carmen's worn jacket in the coat rack. Each snip felt like a betrayal and a benediction all at once. Placing the hair in a sterile envelope, he sealed it with a trembling thumb. That night, Alexander lay awake in the darkness of his bedroom, the envelope on the bedside table like a promise of truth. His mind replayed Carmen's plea, the sharp edge of her desperation, the fierceness in her eyes as she protected Emma from the cold. Judgmental world. Could he judge her for claiming the child as her own when every fiber of his being recognized a deeper bond? He recalled the doctor's voice from the accident report, identification inconclusive. Recommend DNA confirmation. He had dismissed it then, consumed by grief and guilt. But now, those words felt like lifelines thrown across the abyss of his sorrow. As dawn crept through the drawn drapes, Alexander rose and dressed in silence. He placed the hair sample and the family photograph side by side, as if the two objects could speak for themselves. One told the story of a past he thought was lost forever, the other held the key to a future he dared not imagine. With a final glance at the photograph, he whispered into the quiet room, "I need to know the truth." Stepping out into the pale morning light, Alexander headed for the laboratory that would uncover Emma's true identity. He walked with the weight of a man on the brink of redemption and betrayal. Alexander sat in the sterile glow of the hospital archive, the silence broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. File after file lay before him, each a testimony to lives saved or lost. But he was searching for one in particular, one that should never have existed. His fingers trembled as he opened the folder labeled Ruiz Family, June 2019. Inside were X-rays, blood tests, discharge summaries, and a single, yellowed note scrawled in faded ink. Identification problematic due to condition of remains. DNA verification required. His breath hitched. He remembered signing off on papers that day, papers that declared his wife and daughter beyond help. He had buried them both. And yet here was someone's admission that they had never been sure. He rifled through the pages, heart pounding. Then he found it, a second sheet, bearing his own signature at the bottom, but stamped, cancelled per family request. His name, written by his own hand, requesting the destruction of the very evidence that could have saved his child. A wave of nausea washed over him. Betrayal rose in his throat like bile. Had he, in his grief-stricken haze, demanded those tests be halted? Or had someone stolen that choice from him? His mind flashed back to that night 5 years ago, the sirens. The shattering metal, the paramedics' faces masked by sorrow. He had been ushered away, too broken to object, and afterward, he had signed without reading, trusting documents to speak only sadness, never deception. Emerging from the archive, Alexander's gaze fell upon the reception desk, where a weary Dr. Bennett glanced up. The old man's eyes widened when he saw the papers in Alexander's hand. "Sir, you weren't supposed to see those," Dr. Bennett murmured, voice trembling. Alexander stepped forward, voice low but commanding. "Why was the test cancelled? Who authorized it?" The doctor swallowed hard. "The insurance company sent a representative. He provided documentation. He said it would spare you further pain." A name clawed its way into Alexander's consciousness, Victor Mendoza. The very partner he'd exposed and dismissed. The man who had threatened him. Whose betrayal had cost him everything. Dr. Bennett's shoulders slumped. I was young. Overwhelmed. He promised a donation to the pediatric wing. He said it was for your own good. Alexander's heart cracked with fury. Not only had Mendoza stolen his fortune, he had stolen his daughter's life. Clutching the files to his chest, Alexander realized that every moment since Carmen's knock had been a step closer to this revelation. The child in his home was not a ghost of memory, but a living testament to a crime against fate itself. He looked up at Dr. Bennett, resolve hardening in his eyes. "We will correct this," he said. "No more secrets." The late afternoon sun slanted through the Ruiz mansion's tall windows, casting long, wall-like shadows across the parlor floor. Alexander stood rigid by the fireplace, storm clouds in his steel-gray eyes, as Carmen's words hung between them like shattered glass. "I've raised her," Carmen insisted, voice breaking. "I held her through fevers that burned the night away. I was the one who wiped her tears and taught her to say, 'Mama.'" Alexander felt a cold fire ignite in his chest. "And I buried my daughter. I laid her body to rest while every part of me screamed that she was still alive." His hand trembled on the mantel, where a single ivory figurine of a mother and child stood. "That child is my flesh and blood." In that moment, Emma, little Emma with her sky-blue eyes, awoke from her nap. She peered at the two towering figures with wide curiosity, clutching her beloved rag doll. Seeing the tension, her small lips quivered. Carmen's gaze softened, torn between anger and compassion. Alexander's shoulders slumped as guilt flooded back. He was yelling at the woman who had sheltered his daughter from hunger and fear. Emma stood, clutching her doll, and slipped past them into the hallway. Carmen and Alexander froze, then charged after her. The chase led them into the garden, where autumn leaves danced in a sudden gust. Emma ran among the hedges, tiny footsteps quick with panic. Alexander reached her first, scooping her up as a gust blew her curls across his coat. Carmen arrived seconds later, breathless and tear-streaked. They stopped face to face, each holding one of Emma's hands. The child looked between them, confusion clouding her innocent gaze. Carmen whispered, "We're both your family, me Emma." Alexander knelt and murmured, "I will never let you go." Emma's sobs subsided as she wrapped her arms around them both. In that trembling embrace, something shifted, pain began to soften into possibility. They stood united in the garden's golden light. Two parents bound by love and loss, learning the hardest lesson, that family can be forged in the fire of conflict. Night had fallen when Alexander and Carmen slipped through the gates of Victor Mendoza's villa on the outskirts of Madrid. The sprawling estate, once a symbol of Mendoza's ill-gotten wealth, now loomed like a prison of betrayal. In Alexander's hand, a recorder whispered promises of reckoning. By his side, Carmen gripped Emma's small hand, the child trusting her newfound family even in darkness. Inside the marble foyer, Mendoza reclined in an armchair, his twisted smile illuminated by a single lamp. Leather-bound books lined the shelves, but tonight, Mendoza's only reading would be the confession he could no longer escape. "Welcome," Mendoza drawled, raising a glass of amber whiskey. "I figured it was only a matter of time before you came knocking again." "Alex." Anger roared in Alexander's veins, but he forced himself to speak evenly. "You took my daughter from me. You stole years I can never get back." He pressed record. "You owe the world the truth." Mendoza's laugh was harsh. "Truth? I gave you peace. I spared you endless pain." He leaned forward, amber eyes glinting. "I was doing you a favor." Carmen stepped into the light, fury and sorrow warring in her gaze. "You sold her identity, bargained with her life, for money and spite. Do you hear yourself? You used a child as a pawn. Mendoza's face flickered, at once bruised and triumphant. She wasn't your child anymore, Alex. She was mine to give. Alexander's chest tightened. He remembered the emptiness of his home before Carmen's arrival, the funeral that became a cruel fiction. Now, he reclaimed his voice. That ends tonight. He pressed the play button on the recorder. Mendoza's smug confession filled the room, his threats to the doctor, his forged documents, the bribe that silenced justice. Each word was a blow, exposing the calculus of cruelty that cost Alexander 5 years of fatherhood. Mendoza's shoulders sagged as he realized the trap he'd walked into. His bravado crumbled. I did it to hurt you, he stammered, to make you feel what I felt, betrayed. Carmen's voice was steel. You won't hurt anyone else. She held Emma close, protective as a lioness. Alexander stepped forward, grief and resolve shining in his eyes. This ends with your confession. Tomorrow, I hand this tape, and you, over to the authorities. Mendoza sank back, defeated, the fire in his gaze dimmed under the weight of his own wickedness. Outside the villa, Carmen and Alexander led Emma into the crisp night air. The battle had been won, not with violence, but with truth. As the first light of dawn edged the sky, they turned toward home, bound by shared purpose and a fierce love for the little girl who called them both Mom and Dad. Morning light filtered through lace curtains as Alexander watched Emma tiptoe down the grand staircase. Clutching her rag doll, Carmen stood just behind her, smoothing a stray curl from Emma's forehead. In that quiet tableau, something miraculous had taken root, two wounded hearts learning to beat as one. It had been 3 months since they stormed Mendoza's villa, 3 months since truth shattered their past. Yet the real healing began only when they stepped into the sunlit garden of the Ruiz estate, together. Alexander and Carmen had drawn up a new contract, not on paper, but in promises whispered at dawn and shared griefs under the cover of night. Carmen's mornings now started with Emma curled in her lap, feeding the hens they'd rescued from a nearby farm. Alexander joined them before heading to the study, where ledges once signifying empires now recorded Emma's laughter, her daily milestones, her scraped knees, her favorite bedtime stories. Inside, Alexander felt the old ache, the phantom pang of loss, soften each time Emma pressed her small hand into his and whispered, "Papa." And Carmen grew stronger, her loneliness replaced by quiet confidence as she watched Alexander coax the first buds of spring from the orchard. Their bond was not built on romance but on a shared vow, to shield Emma from a world that once tore her away. They found joy in the ordinary, picnics beneath blossoming almond trees, laughter echoing through halls that had known only sorrow. In those moments, destiny revealed its gentlest face, a family forged by choice, not blood. At dusk, the three of them gathered on the terrace, sipping lemonade beneath a sky aflame with sunset. Emma leaned between them, arms outstretched, as if to hold the whole world. Alexander caught Carmen's eye and saw reflected there a strength born of suffering, and the promise of tomorrow. Their journey had begun with grief and deception, yet now, love guided their steps forward. If this story moved you, share your own tales of unexpected family in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys from tragedy to hope.